Orb presents The Secret Origin of the Venture Brothers.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And you're listening to Orb, Episode 0, The Secret Origins of the Venture Brothers.
And this is the first episode of our new show about the Venture Brothers.
This is a weekly, episode-by-episode look at the TV show, The Venture Brothers, including all specials, in-between season things, bonus materials, etc.
Yes.
Welcome.
Who are we? Why should you listen to us? You may be coming to this as the first show on our network.
Yeah. If so, welcome. We are Gary Butterfield and Kole Ross. We've been podcasting under the Duckfeed banner for about 9 years. And we do criticism and comedy. Basically, we talk about video games, movies, miscellaneous.
Yeah.
Most known for Watch Out for Fireballs, which is a Games Club podcast, and Bonfireside Chat, which is an exploration of the Dark Souls series of games and adjacent subject matter.
Yeah. And we are both fans of the Venture Brothers. And so this was a natural fit because
Absolutely.
It's fun to talk about.
Yeah. We love these boys. So if you're just now finding us, head on over to Duckfeed.tv. And you can check out all the other shows we have on offer. If you join our Patreon, you get to join our Slack, and you can talk to people about the Venture Brothers or anything. Just kind of join the community.
Yeah.
So.
And in addition to that, you also get the episodes a week early.
Yeah, of this show and others. Before we go too far into this, we want to give some credit and shout outs, some episode 0 shout outs to the people who did our art and music.
Yeah.
For this series.
Yeah. So that wonderful intro music that you heard was produced by a friend of the show, Gwen. Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah, Gwen. You can find more of her work at soundcloud.com/deepwhale. Really cool stuff. Highly recommended. And we have commissioned Gwen for this and a couple of other things. I'm not 100% sure that she is looking for more commissions, but if you appreciate her work, reach out.
Yes. Over top of that, there was an announcer there. Our friend Brayton is doing the opening voice there. So thank you, Brayton.
Yeah, sonorous voice, that man. And he's handsome and sartorial. And then our cover art is done by Joshua. If you go to J Jarrett, that's JJARRETT.work, which is a great portfolio website. You can see more of his work. He did our awesome cover art.
Yeah.
And we're both big fans of his work, and there's really great stuff on that site.
So super happy with all of that. This is one of the first real shows where we specifically reached out to commission people. We've had fan art done before for other shows, but this is cool. This is getting off on the right foot with like really professional stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, and just mixing it up a little bit because we usually do that stuff for our shows, and we're trying to widen the umbrella a little bit.
Yes.
The main kind of source for this series will be the DVDs, for the episodes, the DVD commentaries, and then a book, the art and making of the Venture Brothers called Go Team Venture.
I can't recommend this book enough. It's really, really good.
It's wonderful. It has that almost too big to read. Kind of thing. Like it is hard to read in bed.
Yes.
But it is a great book full of behind the scenes stuff. Those will be our primary sources. We'll be looking into other stuff as well, online. And we're going to end up doing some just kind of research because one of the things that I would like to do with the show is explain some of the references.
Yeah. It's incredibly dense with reference.
Yes. And it happens to be references that are entirely up my alley. So it's a lot of 80s New Wave and Marvel Comics, which I am a conglomeration of those two things. Yeah. Essentially. So it is
I'm
good.
I'm a big fan of corny, like mid-century, like kids media. So that's fun.
Yeah. And blonde curly mullets.
Yep.
So as a curled mullet man yourself, you can be our expert on the hair care.
I don't have a curled mullet.
Well, you can believe who you want to believe, listeners.
Okay.
It's, you can believe me. Yeah. Trustworthy. Milky tenor. Or you can believe Bass Boy over here.
Oh, yes. Traditionally the villain in opera. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, starting out on a weird foot there. Okay.
Well, we're the Venture Brothers. Yeah. let's talk about our history with the show. Why do we want to do this? What do we like about the Venture Brothers?
Let's do it. You go first, because I think that you were a bigger fan of the show earlier than I was.
I was in the Venture Brothers from the ground floor, baby. I watched every season as it came out when I had TV, and then got the DVDs as soon as they were available as they came out. When the show was on the air at any given time, it was my favorite show. Yeah. We will talk about how the show, it's like 7 seasons over the course of 17 years, or something like that. It's not something that came out very regularly, but when it was on, it was my favorite show.
Yes.
This spoke to me so hard at the time. In the early 2000s, I became kind of obsessed and realized my thing was this specific flavor of comedy that was melancholy and obsessed with failure.
Yeah.
My early touch point for that is always the Royal Tenenbaums, which is all about exceptional people past their prime. And I have always thought about this idea of like, what happens after?
Yes.
You become this hero, you become this lauded person, but you still have to wake up the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. And this series really spoke to me because it speaks to that directly.
Yes.
I love this so much. Like my ex-wife unearthed a picture of me dressed up as the Monarch for Halloween.
Oh, fun.
So we went as the Monarch and Dr. Girlfriend once for Halloween. I used to collect the action figures of this and really obsessed over every episode.
Yeah.
So just absolutely huge fan. They had early on, they had a t-shirt of the week or t-shirt of the month club. And I did not have the disposable income just to sign up for the whole series, but I did buy the Dr. Girlfriend shirt, which is a rare, like one of the rarer items I own now, which is a weird thing. And I love it. It's like it's probably the oldest shirt I have. Nice. That's still in rotation.
Yeah. I'm sure the design was incredibly good because the design chops are for everything surrounding the show is great. I got the box set of all the DVDs. Like every one of them has its own little theme to it. I love the Atari the Atari cartridge cover one. Yeah, it's all very good. I'm happy you basically hit on the idea of failure because that's the thing that I love about this too. I do like how melancholy it is. Initially, when this kind of came on, I didn't know what to make of it. For people who are first tuning in and listening to us, I'm younger than Gary. I was born in
much younger.
I was 7 years. So, depending, but when this first came on, I was in high school and I did enjoy watching Adult Swim, but I liked the more absurd kind of stuff. So that early kind of crazy period of Adult Swim when it was, Aqua Teen Hunger Force and especially C-Lab. I love
C-Lab.
I was all about C-Lab kind of as this extension of kind of a kind of sense of surreal humor that I enjoyed from back in, when I watched Syphil and Ollie on late night MTV. That stuff on Adult Swim was a real extension of that. Venture Brothers was this entirely different thing and kind of has always been different than the stuff that has been shown on Adult Swim, especially the stuff that was produced specifically for it. And so it was initially something that I was pretty, I didn't know what to make of it. Right. So, I enjoyed what I saw of the first season, the episode where Dr. Venture transforms into a caterpillar is I remember being horrified by watching that.
It's a real classic.
Yeah. I was just man, just this thing is kind of all over the map, and it also came out very infrequently. I didn't really sit down and really start watching it until I was in college, and I was working at the time I was working at a video game store, and one of my managers, who mostly we talked about what it was like in prison because he was an ex-con, but he was like, oh, I like this Venture Brothers show. And he would just as we were talking, because we needed to pass the time, he would describe the different characters and talk about stuff that happened. I was like, yeah, I remember seeing that. I didn't know it was that involved. And I went back to it and I saw how dense everything was and how quick it was, and really tuned into the fact that once it settled in, and I understood that yes, this is a story about fundamentally miserable people, and understood what it was drawing a reference to. That's when it hooked in for me. And so by the time I started watching it, I think they were partway through season 3 or something like that. And I kind of was all in after that point.
Contrasting this with the rest of Adult Swim's lineup at the time is really important because, they're not mutually exclusive. Like, I loved Aqua Teen. I love C-Lab. I still love C-Lab. I think
Yes.
C-Lab actually holds up really well.
It does.
But this is a serialized show. And even more so than other serialized shows, things change in the Venture Brothers. There is lore to the Venture Brothers, and it's operating on a level that Adult Swim is not.
Yes.
Like, even now, like Adult Swim has made some of my all-time favorite shows. I love everything Tim and Eric has done. I love the Eric Andre show. We mentioned C-Lab. Like, there's all this stuff that I really, really like. This is going for something different and elevated.
The only thing that I could see that was even trying to touch this space was Moral Oral, concurrently at that time.
Yeah. And even then, it was not as long-lasting or as ambitious.
Yes.
This really changes gears as it goes and becomes like kind of a different show. Like, one of the things that I love about this is that this starts out pretty good, pretty good to good, and then gets absolutely transcendently phenomenal as it goes. Like, it starts out really good. And if it had stayed at the season 1 and 2 level, it would still be a really funny show that's worth talking about.
Yeah.
But the way things move and evolve and expand reminds me of shows that bat higher.
Yeah.
A weird thing about this show, and this is a weird comparison, but one of the things I love, and boy, this is a tired reference, but one of the things I love about The Wire is that The Wire never just switches focus. It always expands. So it's like, here's this new aspect of the city. Here's how it interacts with every old aspect of the city. That's what the Venture Brothers do. It's like, oh, here's OSI, here's Sphinx, here's, let's actually get into the council.
Yeah.
The League of Calamity, the Calamity Against Intent. Like, it actually allows you to learn about these things and how they relate to each other. And then with the 7th season, which gets like absolutely incredible, it becomes more serialized and even more about these origins and deeper as it starts going into the Monarch's parents' origins.
Yeah. Which was just like Monarch's origin at the start was literally like, it was just a throwaway. Like, it was a way for them to set up like a gag that they stopped doing. And the fact that that comes back and becomes like a fulcrum on which the fate of all of these people kind of hinges is ridiculous. Like, there's like things that begin as throwaway jokes in this almost always end up coming back in a different context and almost always have some kind of emotional core to them that is deeper and connected to more things than you would expect.
It is more planned than a lot of shows that it's peers with. And some of that you can see being like, I don't think when they I know when they thought of the Monarch, they didn't think of the Blue Morpho stuff.
Yes.
We've seen their pitch document, but there's foreshadowing about, Jonas Jr.
Yep.
Very early on in the series. Like, they did have plans for a lot of this stuff. It's impressive.
Yeah.
Like, there are certain TV shows that make me feel like an idiot. In the best possible way.
Yeah.
Like this. And then, I know it's become tainted because of the later seasons, but Arrested Development is like that for me as well, where I'm like, fuck, man. Like, that is clever.
Yeah. I had no idea. I had no idea that this was a machine. I had no idea how intricate the machine was. Like, I had no idea what was going on under the surface to make this stuff connect. Yeah.
Yes. And finding it out is an absolute delight.
Yes.
And it's going to be really fun to like actually dig in and break all that shit down. So let's get into for this episode, we want to explain what the show is weekly. It will probably be a little bit longer than this episode.
Yes.
Is because I do really want to break down those references. And it will probably get longer as there's more lore.
Yes.
To kind of talk about. Real quick before we get, and this episode we're going to talk about the show origins and kind of briefly talk about the main cast. Before we get into that, I don't think this is a good show for people, like, you could watch the show along with us. That'd be fine.
Yeah.
You can experience the show vicariously through us. That'd be fine. What I think, I wouldn't just, we're going to spoil stuff.
Yes.
Those call forwards and those foreshadowing things I want to talk about because it's impressive that they included them. I don't want to be cagey about who Jonas Jr. is.
Yeah.
Because they're laying down the work for it. So just know that, like, there's not really a spoiler policy to this. there's 7 seasons of this. The last season came out several years ago. The first season of it came out a really long time ago, like 2003.
Yeah.
I feel like we're beyond the spoiler wall for any of this shit.
Yes. So understand that going forward. Listen at your own risk, although we encourage you to listen and follow along.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the show origins. The pilot, it aired in 2003, and the series began on Adult Swim in 2004. The pilot is present, like you can just see that both on any streaming service and also on the DVDs. The Terrible Secret of Turtle Bay. Again, a remarkable thing, how much stuff is present there, even if it is weird.
Worst episode of the series.
Yes. Yeah.
But they just had not found the voice.
Right. We'll talk about that next episode. But yeah, they developed the pilot, pitched it. As of this recording, like we said, October 2020, the show has been canceled. The show was canceled in between the time when we announced that we are going to be doing this show. Yeah. Selfishly, solipsistically, we killed it by observing it. So you're welcome, everybody. We took away a thing that you love.
Adult Swim has tweeted that they're in talks with Venture, but they want more Venture Brothers, and they're talking to the creators about ways to finish the story.
Yes.
So, and I could see this wrapping up with a movie. Also, canceled does not mean what it used to.
Right.
With these kind of things, Futurama came back, Family Guy came back. Shows can come back. So I do not actually think that's the end of the Venture Brothers. I don't know that we'll necessarily get season after season after season. But we kind of weren't getting that anyway. We were getting one season every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I think that getting a movie or a final season or a special feels very appropriate to me.
Yes. So we're in this weird liminal space where there has been huge Venture Brother news, but as of right now, there are 7 seasons, and it comes to a kind of close, even if nothing new kind of comes along.
The Venture Brothers is primarily created by Christopher McCulloch, aka Jackson Public. In the late 90s, McCulloch worked on the animated series of The Tick.
That's a good cartoon. I didn't know there was a connection.
It made so much sense to me.
Yep.
When I found that out, there are Tick jokes that are basically Venture Brothers jokes.
Yes.
And I don't know if that is Public being influenced by Edlund, or if that is vice versa. Like those were always Public contributing.
Yeah. It also could be like that they Public and who's the guy who made The Tick?
Oh, Ben Edlund?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Ben, I think Ben Edlund.
It could just be that they had similar sensibilities, like similar absurd reference kind of preferences. So it could have been like followed like.
Yeah, there is in The Tick. There is a Fantastic Four knockoff called the Civic Minded 5. And that is them showing up as a one-off is such a Venture Brothers thing.
Yes.
And so much so that the Venture Brothers did a version of that with the polyamorous, Mr. Polyamory and his 4 wives as like a Fantastic Four kind of thing. So that pedigree makes sense. Public moved to LA to work on the live action version of The Tick. That's where he met Patrick Warburton, who was the voice of the Tick and originally the live action Tick before the Peter Serafinowicz version.
Many years later. Yeah. But that's where he established that relationship. Patrick Warburton, most people would probably know him from Seinfeld. He played Putty. Very distinctive voice, does a lot of voice acting. Here, he does the voice for Brock Sampson. Very distinctive. Yeah. And he had worked in other animation in addition to The Tick, like he did Sheep in the Big City. He had done some work on King of the Hill. I want to see specifically what he did on King of the Hill because I fucking love that show. And if there's anything he wrote,
the one where they go to the underwater base. It's the one where they go to the underwater base and fight 50s robots, actually. Dad, there's 50s robots. Oh, I don't know about them.
Talk about dang all that. Spider-Man got that web coming up, but
well, I never. Yeah. Ding, 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 ding. He also, I love in the Go Team Venture book, they talk about how he used to work for him and a bunch of other animators worked for Doug on Nickelodeon. And they like, I love this line because he talks about, he's like, no offense to Doug, but a lot of us were more talented than just being able to drive the car Doug drives around, or draw the car that Doug drives around, or the remote control for his TV. And just the idea that like you do need a stable of dudes who are probably frustrated cartoonists who are happy to work in animation, who are just drawing lamps and shit.
Yeah, working on a boring show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like as Public as McCulloch was putting the show together, like he ended up like meeting his collaborator Doc Hammer, who is this actor and musician, and eventually would become kind of a co-creator and a collaborator on the show.
Yes. And I think that Doc Hammer is primarily where like a lot of the music kind of DNA of this comes through. I'm sure Jackson Public enjoys music. Doc Hammer was a figure in like certain kinds of gothic synth bands and stuff that I've not heard. If this show goes on long enough, that'd be a fun idea for a special or something. Let's check out Doc Hammer's bands or a Patreon exclusive or something.
Yeah.
But the two of their voices definitely congeal to make the magic.
Yes.
During this time, Public was really obsessed with mid-century and kind of space age pop culture. So things like Johnny Quest, the Hardy Boys, things like that. And then just kind of in his sketchbook, as early as working on The Tick, he came up with characters who were Hank and Dean Venture.
Yeah, Ma Venture didn't raise no fools.
They're pretty close to like what they would become.
Yeah.
The drawings are a little bit more like grotesque, I feel like. Almost in like almost like a Ren and Stimpy way. And they're not quite as dim-witted.
Right.
As they'll ultimately end up being.
But they're there. And that is something that you can see if you read this, if you have this beautiful book that is there. But yeah, like he had those here, and you can kind of see, like this is a show that does wear its influences on its sleeve. Something I was unaware of is that there was just this whole series of like children's books called Tom Swift Jr. and Tom Swift Sr. that basically like ran in the 30s, and then in the 60s they did as kid, almost like an Indiana Jones Jr. kind of thing. And so like Public got obsessed with this idea of like what happens when you have a boy genius growing up in the shadow of his father. And that's where you get like kind of the emotional core of this, which is the deeply miserable character of Rusty Venture.
Yeah, it's a deconstruction, right? Like this is an early example of something that I saw that I recognized as such, of asking the question, what would it really be like to live these adventuresome lives? Yeah. What is Johnny Quest's therapy sessions like? Because that guy had a rough life. And we find out in like season 4 or 5. Like we literally go to Johnny Quest's therapy session.
Season 2.
Was that in season 2?
Yeah, season
with
2.
Roboy?
Yeah. No. So the therapy happens in later, like I think season 3 or 4. But Action Johnny shows up very early on.
Yeah, I knew he had showed up. I meant literally his therapy session. It's like this thing that I was thinking, like, we actually get to see it. They ask that question, like, what is life like for people who live in this fantastical world? And the answer is shitty.
Like a little kid is like supposed to go to school and supposed to have like, stable parents, is not supposed to have near death experiences on a weekly basis.
Yeah, you shouldn't even know what a frogman is.
Right.
And they're everywhere here. And just dealing with the fallout from that, and then having him, Doc Venture, we're going to talk about the characters next, express his... try to express love for his children while not getting over the trauma of his own childhood, and successfully not repeating his own mistakes in some ways while also doing like way worse. Like it's like a design. It's a machine to make a bad person. And the my favorite episode of the series is just getting out on Front Street. It's called The Doctor Is Sin.
It's amazing. Yeah.
That's my favorite episode of the series. Maybe one of my favorite single episodes of anything ever that deals with that question so directly. And just these questions that should be at the margin of any thinking person who is watching something with 90% buy-in. I love that angle for these things where like, would it suck to grow up to be, Mr. Fantastic's kid. You know, you have infinite power, and Thanos is always trying to get up in your shit.
Yep.
You know, you have to make the heroes get reborn. That sucks. Nobody liked that storyline. Like, it would just be really bad. And again, that thing I mentioned earlier, even after these moments, you still have to wake up.
Yes.
So characters in the show, like, have breakfast and, you know, go to dinner and talk about, like, what they're doing for school and have yard sales and pay rent. And all of these things that are the day-to-day life stuff that isn't fighting frogmen or mummies.
Yeah. Like, that's part of what makes the Guild of Calamitous Intent, like, one of my favorite things in the show is just, like, literally the banality of evil. Like, the fact that there is a bureaucracy around this to accomplish what? You know, like, it's amazing. Just these organizations, and ultimately, like, people with deeply unfulfilled dreams and broken families and no support structure who are just fucking miserable. Like, there's a lot of comedy that comes from a way that everything comes up short for them.
Yeah, it's very sad. And not only are they suffering from not getting their grand wishes met, they're also, like, trying to get laid, and they're trying to, you know, just, so it's high and low. Yeah. Kind of things being unfulfilled in deeply profound ways on multiple levels.
Yeah.
So the plan originally was to make Venture Brothers a comic. You know, if you look at the book Go Team Venture, it has 2 pages from it where he like literally stopped and said, "This is good, and I want to just write a screenplay."
Yeah.
Of it. It's fantastic art. The comic is good and looks like it would have been fun. I'm glad this came out as a cartoon.
Same. The voice acting, like, the performances actually lift this a lot for me.
Way, like, tons, and the comic timing. And there's also, in terms of a dodged bullet, they met with a studio in Portland, Oregon, who wanted to make this as CG.
Yeah, that would have been awful.
Yeah, boy, because he says, like, oh, you know, this, I wanted to go for this retro kind of bad on purpose aesthetic. Why not make this beautiful? And without at the time realizing, oh no, like, CG from 2002 or 2003 was not about to look beautiful,
right, or
timeless now. Like, this could have been like Reboot.
Yeah.
Some shit like that. And we wouldn't be talking about it because I don't think I would have been able to stick with it. No. Even with this, if everything else was the same, like, it would just be too hard to look at.
It would be an object of fun, you know, and as it stands, like, the first season of this is, before they changed the animation style, is already a little bit like, you know, kind of like Flash animation-y, to a certain extent, you know, like, it's a little bit of a tougher putt, even if the actual assets do look really good. If this was bad 2003 cable level CG, yeah, it would be an object of fun. You would have to disregard it, no matter how good the writing was. Like, that would be a very big hurdle to get over.
Yeah. And as is, like, the first season, which is not as good, it eventually gets great, you know, in terms of animation. And the first season is not a war crime. And even then looked more animated and more involved than anything else on Adult Swim at the time.
Yes.
You know, which was literally Flash animation. Like, most Adult Swim stuff was like paper dolls.
Yes.
You know, moving around.
Yeah. But it became an animated series. They had chopped it around. Comedy Central had rejected it. Public had initially written off the idea of taking it to Cartoon Network because he wanted it to be for adults, right? He had those core ideas there, and he didn't want to have to water it down. But it made a pretty good fit for Adult Swim. And they said, yeah, we're going to take this, and we're really not going to, like, force you to change much of anything.
Yeah, it was very serendipitous. He had to rewrite the script. The second act was a little boring.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, they had budget for 3 pilots, and they'd already bought 2. I wish I knew what those other 2 were to understand why it wasn't in the book. But this one actually ended up taking off.
Yeah.
And they're basically off to the races. There'll be, you know, production details and kind of changes that we'll talk about, you know, as we get into other seasons and such. Astro Base Go, the studio that Public and Hammer have formed, sounds awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, they talk about just this, like, loft in New York where they could, like, scream at 2 a.m. and play music, and basically it just sounds like a creative's dream. Which is also part of why this series appeals to me, is that, with, you know, I don't think I was smart enough to make it, but I wish that I had. You know, and the kind of creative freedom they're given to take these risks is something that any creative person, I think, could, like, look on with jealousy and admiration.
Oh yeah, definitely an envious situation.
Yeah. Let's kind of break down the characters, the main characters, and then call it for this episode, and then come back next week for that terrible secret of Turtle Bay.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the main cast here, kind of who was initially present on the show. The thing about the Venture Brothers, if you're new to it, and even if you are, passively familiar with it, there's so many characters. There are more characters than you actually remember there being. If you go and just like look at a big list, and they like are in groups. Like we're not going to talk about the order of the triad because that doesn't form until like season 2.
Yeah.
So we will introduce them as they are brought in, but this core cast of the Venture family and kind of the Monarchs crew kind of form the basis of this and kind of set out the key dynamics.
Yes. Yeah. And I just want to do like our kind of brief little bit on each character. Like,
yes.
What do you think of these guys? Primarily, we got Dr. Thaddeus Rusty Venture, voiced by James Urbaniak. So he is somewhat of a super scientist, the son of a super scientist more than anything.
Mostly taking his taking his dad's like unfinished inventions and trying to sell them to militaries around the world. Yeah.
Yep. He is a pill addict. He is a bad father. And is living in his father's shoes. Something that's really interesting from Go Team Venture is the original pitch was that he made like infomercial shit. And that was supposed to be the contrast. I like this version.
Yes.
Way better.
Yeah.
Who's just kind of like, coasting along, but isn't really, he's not the dad from Gremlins. Like he's not making smokeless ashtrays.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, Rusty steals the show for me. And I think that a lot of that has to do with James Urbaniak's performance. Yeah, like it is pretty much there from the beginning, and like he kind of sets the pace for the show, I think, in terms of like the way that the dialogue and patter goes. And as he is the core driver of a lot of the misery that we see first and foremost. It's his failure that kind of sets everything.
He's also my favorite collection of quirks.
Yes.
In this, like you will get little things about Dr. Venture, and they range from like big, like he thinks of himself as a ladies' man. That's great. To like small, like he, one of my favorite running through lines is his predilection for girl drinks that no one would ever drink.
Yep.
Where he'll have a drink, he'll be like, you start with a tall pour of Kahlua or something like that. And that's or a tall pour of grenadine. And nobody can, but he just, there's a confidence to it that I really absolutely adore.
Yeah.
With him.
And like there's something about like, it makes sense to talk about the Venture compound when you talk about Rusty, because he doesn't have it's the compound that his dad built, right? And it's very mid-century and very like almost like Brady Bunch like mod kind of stuff. Everything there is super 70s. And I love the aesthetic to it. And everything about his taste is like super 70s because he is, stuck. Like his development is arrested because he has not emotionally moved past the damage that his dad has done. And so the fact that he is living in this very outdated kind of place and basically doesn't change anything is very neat to me.
Yeah. Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Brock Sampson. Voiced by Patrick Warburton. This is their family bodyguard, assigned by OSI, or the Office of Secret Intelligence.
It's like the race band of this.
Yes. Big, blonde powerhouse murder machine.
Yes.
Absolutely incredible performance here as well. Still waters run really deep.
Yes.
The kind of things we learn about this character and about OSI and his background and the moves this character makes are really phenomenal.
Yeah. His characterization changes an awful lot, I think, especially even from the pilot into the rest of season 1. Like in the pilot, he abandons the family in order to go sleep with a prostitute that's the first episode, actually, the first proper episode. Yeah. Like early on, he is more of like almost like a James Bond kind of guy. But like he actually is incredibly loyal to the Venture brothers and has a lot of like affection specifically for the kids. And even though he is like this caricature of masculinity, like shirtlessly washing his, Dodge Charger while listening to Led Zeppelin, you know, and killing people with a K-bar knife exclusively. He doesn't use guns. Like, he also like gardens on the Venture compound and acts like the nanny for the kids. So yeah, still like the fact that he has this depth, and like most of what he does ends up being like raising the kids in a way that Rusty can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of heart to Brock Sampson.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, like very clearly and directly with his relationship with the boys, but even with Dr. Venture.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of Dr. Venture's only friend. You know, and, you know, Pete White and Billy Quizboy accepted, like, you know, Brock and him have worked together, you know, for a very long time. And this is a really well observed, you know, you can tell that Brock Sampson probably doesn't have a lot of respect for Dr. Venture, but they're coworkers.
Yeah.
And he's lived with them. Like, they're family, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, one of my favorite moments, since you mentioned the Doctor is sin, and because there's no spoiler policy here, or the spoiler policy is anything goes. At the end of that episode, after, you know, what happens with, you know, Dr. Killinger and his magic murder bag, when Killinger tells Rusty, like, yeah, no, you're a supervillain, and, you know, Rusty like vulnerably like asks Brock, like, hey man, am I a bad guy? And the fact that Brock just like his only answer is to like make a so kind of like,
and then the episode ends.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah,
I think about, one of the things I think about their relationship a lot is when they're flashing back to the boys and they're like, what was that time we both had and he kind of points at his lip and they'd both grown a mustache.
Yeah.
That's a really well observed, like, two roommates or two brothers.
Oh yeah,
doing something to be goofy.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what do we both have mustaches? Let's try that out.
Yeah, like it's very like the relationship is beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful and fun. We got Hank Venture, voiced by Jackson Public. He is the more adventurous of the two, a little bit more jock.
Yeah,
he dresses like Freddy from Scooby-Doo. He's got a kerchief.
Yep.
And he's somehow dumber. Like, one of the dynamics of this, you know, and I've talked about this with other shows on the network, but it's like the It's Always Sunny dynamic or whatever. When you get a group of dumb people and you have one person who's dumb but slightly less dumb, that works perfectly. Like, It's Always Sunny wouldn't work without Dennis to be sometimes the voice of reason, like, you know, what the real world might be like. And the idea of, hey, you know, that being Dean in this is really good.
Dean, who has a number of problems himself, but is not as dim as Hank is. I love the explanation for this and the way that they seed the revelation for that later on.
Absolutely.
Because Hank just doesn't know basic facts, and like the kids don't go to school. Like they go to bed. They learn from a bed that talks to them while they sleep. I mean, like the reveal is like Hank is dumb because he doesn't, like, he unplugs the speaker. So he is effectively unschooled. Like he never actually learned anything. He just has whatever he does with the group.
He's an autodidact icon.
Yes.
Hank Venture. His character development as the Venture brothers separate from each other and get more different after an event that happens, which we'll talk about. I guess I won't say right now because it is pretty fun. It'll be fun to talk about in the moment. That's great. Like, the two trajectories Hank and Dean go on, I absolutely love, because they become very well developed and very different characters.
Yes. We should talk about Dean. Dean is kind of the younger, coded as younger. He's the nerdy one, voiced by Michael Sinterniklaas. I know that I am mispronouncing that, but that's the best I've got. Dresses in a sweater vest and is the more nerdy, the more reserved, and the more timid of them. Kind of like more closely takes after Rusty.
Yeah, he very specifically dresses like Peter Parker.
Yes.
In 60s Spider-Man comics. So we have Fred from Scooby-Doo and Peter Parker. And he is the one who is, early on at the very least, potentially a victim of his father. Trying to do to him what, Dr. Venture Sr. did to him. Yeah,
Dean is the favorite, and Hank is a subject of kind of relentless abuse and neglect. Even more so. Yes. Even though they're both neglected.
And abused.
Yeah.
And then rounding out the immediate family is Helper, which is a robot voiced by Soulbot. This is this robot nanny that helped raise Dr. Venture and now helps raise the Venture brothers. He makes incomprehensible beeps that everyone can understand.
I love the way that he talks. It's one of my favorite sounds in media.
It's really good. And he is sentient.
Yeah, he has emotions.
He gets sad. Yeah. I love Helper. They do a lot of great stuff with Helper.
Yeah. Sorry, just the way that he transforms, I think, between season 3 and 4.
It's very funny. Yeah. So yeah, Helper is great. I like how he acts as the drum machine for Shallow Gravy.
Yep. And they can't change the beat, I think.
Yeah.
You can only do that one sound. Oh,
Super
man. But yeah, that's the core Venture Brother family. That's going to expand, and like there are going to be people like the Order of the Triad, like Billy Quizboy and Pete
Jr.
White, Jonas Jr., who kind of like kind of attach to and expand on that. But these are the people who are present at the beginning.
Yeah, a huge cast. In terms of the Monarchs crew, which is the initial antagonist and antagonist throughout the entire show, even though they do some Monster of the Week style stuff.
Yes.
So they are arched. That's the terminology in this universe. His arch villain. So all super scientists or superheroes are assigned an arch villain from the Guild of Calamitous Intent.
Yes.
And the Monarch is our first one, voiced by Jackson Public. He is themed around monarch butterflies. He was raised by them. And his costume and hideout are themed as such. So it's royalty crossed with butterfly.
Yes. He flies around in a gigantic cocoon that he thinks he can hide, but it just, is hovering over the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, it's the size of a building.
Yes. Yeah. And there was an early gag where the Monarch very clearly didn't understand butterfly biology at all. Like he had no idea like how long they lived or like what the migration cycle was. They got rid of that because there's nowhere you can go with that joke. It's
when they decided they wanted to have him have more of a backstory.
Yeah.
I felt like a little bit like at some point there was going to be a different villain for every season or 2 seasons. They would have with the changing, and I think they just love the Monarch.
Yes.
And built a lot of lore around him and ended up using him.
Yeah, but like he's this trust fund kid. Like he's obsessed with Venture for reasons that are unclear at the start. And he is petulant and deeply insecure.
Yes. Yeah. He is joined by Dr. Girlfriend, who is his partner and later wife, voiced by Doc Hammer. This is, his second in command. She is dressed like Jackie O and has a very deep voice.
Yes.
So there's jokes to this as far as like one of the things that I want to get out on Front Street is that like this was a cartoon that came out in 2003. So there's people throwing around the R slur, calling things gay.
Yep.
Things like that. We'll note that when it pops up as a thing. I'm not going to, it was in the water at the time. One of the things that I think this kind of trucks with, but I personally just as straight cis white dude, don't think it crosses a line with is with Dr. Girlfriend in terms of transphobia. I think the joke that this person who is like this traditional standard of beauty and poise, Jackie O, just having the ultimate like gruff guy voice doesn't feel like it's coded as anything other than silly.
It's people's reactions early on, and this fades away. Like people make kind of offhand remarks or jokes like was she always a woman, etc. Like quick questions like that. That does fade away. We're not here to excuse that, but like the fact of her that she just has this voice just kind of seems like a goofy thing. It is only ever presented as just like a throwaway thing about her.
When you get used to it as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you eventually, it's just kind of like you get acclimated to it. It no longer even becomes a joke.
Yeah.
It just becomes the character's voice. I guarantee that there are people who are smarter than we are and have more skin in the game who have written essays about this very subject. And I would encourage everyone listening to this to go read them. It is, it didn't bother me, and it's not my place to excuse it or, explain it.
Yes.
It's just, I'm going to stay in my lane for that one.
Yeah.
If that does bother you and it hampers your enjoyment of the show in any way, that is valid and good.
Yes.
And fine.
She has a pretty deep characterization as well. Like she has this past, she is not, the Monarch is not her first, kind of role that she has taken in the Guild of Calamitous Intent. Like she used to be her own supervillain. She was Lady Au Pair. She was a second in command for other people. She was like Lady Etheria working with Phantom Limb. So like she is an old hand at this villainy stuff. And she's very practical in most regards and keeps the operation running. Like she's the only person who seems to care about the henchmen. But also like, I don't know, she loves the Monarch and he's a real screwed up dude.
Yeah.
And, probably ends up in a lot of situations because, he screws her over quite a bit, but ultimately they end up sticking together.
Yeah. I like the genuine emotion.
Yes.
At the core of their relationship quite a bit. And I also really like the choice of not making her this one-note joke, of giving her this history and entwining her as much as anyone into the backstory of the antagonism side of this. Really just inspired choice.
Yeah.
He has henchmen, an entire army of henchmen, but the two principal characters are henchmen 21 and 24. They're named later in the series and become more prominent characters. Early on, they just have distinct voices.
Yes.
And they're good voices that every once in a while I can do a good impersonation of both, but never at the same time.
No.
This is some kind of curse. So
yeah, they're good characters, and the way that they deconstruct plot immunity is very fun to me.
I love that shit, and I'm glad they drop it though too.
Yes.
Like early on, them doing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern commentary on the tropes of the genre was incredibly fun. And then eventually, like again, the show just evolves. It's like, oh, we're kind of past that though.
Yeah, it's like,
we're actually going to take this stuff seriously because you guys do, because we put in all this work.
Yeah, and that's something laudable about the show, to kind of bring it back. We've talked about the cast here, but like to bring it back, like they're not afraid to throw something away once it is stopped being useful, or to repurpose it, right?
Yeah, or probably grew a little bit. Like the things like the language, like using the R slur or calling things gay or anything like that. Like I think they probably just grew out of it the same way I did, right? Like when this came out, I was 23, not a super woke 23-year-old. I wasn't a monster. I wasn't like on Stormfront, but I wasn't like, I don't think I was regularly calling things, gay or retarded, but I was maybe 6 years out from that, having done that quite a bit. Late 90s, early 2000s, man. Like, I don't want to let it off the hook, but it's okay for people to grow and change.
Yes.
And I think that in the show, you get to watch the creators realize, we don't have to lean on that shit. That's a dumb crutch and we don't need it. And they didn't. Like, they had the chops. Like, they didn't have to do it. So.
Yeah. I think that's everything that I had prepared for this. I'm real excited to start talking about the show.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to start watching and really diving in. We really appreciate you listening to this first episode of Orb, episode 0. We will be back next week. If you would like to get these a week early, you can patronize us by going to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. You can also get a bunch of other shows, everything else early. We recommend, if this is your first show on the network, checking out our other stuff. If you have interest to include things like video games and such. Yeah. Which you probably do.
Probably.
And when a show first starts out, it's very important to get people to listen. It's very important to get ratings, reviews on Apple Podcast Addict, and then also telling your friends.
Yes.
About it.
So if you have friends who like the show, or maybe listen to, or maybe watched the Venture Brothers back in the day, just help spread the word. We don't do advertisement really. In the past, we maybe bought a couple of banner ads here and there, but it's entirely we rely on you guys. We rely on the audience. Yes. So we appreciate if you take the time and talk about us on social media or message boards, blogs, etc.
Yeah. We really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully this show goes well. I'm looking forward to recording it and watching the episodes regardless. I think it'll be really fun to talk through. And we can't wait to share it with you.
Yeah. So if you want to find all of the episodes, if you're listening to this in the past, you can either look wherever you're getting podcasts, or we have a home on the web at orb.show is the website for this.
Yeah. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can do so at GaryBuh, GaryBuh.
Yep. You can follow me on Twitter at Kole Ross. That is KoleRoss.
And you can follow the network at Duckfeed.tv.
Yes.
And until next time,
Go Team
Team Venture seems the obvious one.
Yeah.
Go Team Venture.